First, could you talk to me a little bit about the setup that you have here at the airport in terms of your capacity and the different tests that you offer currently?
In Hamburg Airport, we currently have 2 testing sites, and the setup is typically that people are requested to use our digital platform. So you need to register, we need to get the core data, which is due to the health regulations, so that in case of positive cases, we are able to report accordingly to the authorities and intersect and cut the infection chains. And after that, you experience the entrance to our testing facilities, where typically we do a small health check. We check the temperature so that we don't have symptomatic people there. We are offering it only for asymptomatic people. They check that you are registered on our platform, yet you purchase the test, and then you are directly going to the testing area where they do a throat swab. We do for both the antigen and the PCR, just the throat swab, and then your samples are registered to your profile so that we know them. So from this point of view, both tests we are offering to you are pretty much the same. The antigen test as well as for the PCR, we are taking 2 swabs. If you get a regular PCR test with the 24 hours, we just take 1 due to the service offering there. And then on the one hand side, we offer the antigen test, which has a TAT of roughly 1 hour, where we analyze the sample directly near the airport or on the airport side in a truck we've placed there. You may have seen it, where we run the instrument. That is interesting that we are not using tests where you just put it on a small stripe, but we use a fluorescence-based machine to read the results of the antigen reaction, which is critical for us to get high sensitivity. Because what we found when we validated the antigen tests, that the other ones which you just use as so-called point of care tests and you just look at a stripe, don't have the sensitivity, and we miss roughly 50% of the positive cases. So that's the reason why we are not using that. We use this one in the truck. And then you get your result via our platform. In the other case, your sample is shipped by a courier to our lab, which is in Hamburg city center. And there it's then processed in the typical PCR. We do an extraction of the RNA, we isolate it, and then we give it to a qPCR machine. So running several cycles, multiply genetic information and then check whether we find the genetic information in the samples we got from you. And the same thing is you get a notification, dear customer, your result is now ready in your portal. And again, you need to check in and you can download it in several languages. The antigen is roughly done within 60 minutes. The PCR we offer there 2 products. One takes 6 hours, the other one 24 hours. The PCR is more precise by factor 10 to 100 compared to the antigen. With the PCR, we can catch 1 to 2 viruses per microliter testing, what we get.
In terms of capacity, obviously everybody wants travel to open up again in Europe. The numbers traveling are quite small globally and in Europe. So capacity for you at the moment, you're able to handle it no problem. What do you see as the future next year when, Europe hopefully does open up? Or do you think we're going to have to wait for a vaccine? Or do you think we can handle maybe rapid testing and allow many more people to travel?
Yeah. Well, in Hamburg, in the testing facility, I would say with the new capacity we have, I feel comfortable to test up to 3,000, 4,000 people a day, which is not so much in terms of former air travel. Nevertheless, it's something where we can open definitely more than we have as of today. And I think the vaccine will help us to overcome some hurdles. But even with the vaccine, we won't have 100% of really vaccinated people. So the question is, what are you going to do with the others? Do you accept that? Do you want to have some tests and flights to be sure that people are there? I see the growing demand of these tests, and I see the big advantage of the antigen test is the speed compared to the PCR. So I see a growing market in that area.
And you've concerns that the antigen obviously is not as accurate as the PCR. Do you think governments and airports and airlines will accept that as a screening process that is good but not perfect?
Well, there are different interests there. So if you talk about airlines, for sure they're willing to, because they want to fly, which is clear, and also the passengers want to fly. So it's a question on the personal side, what kind of risk are we willing to accept? And I think that will differ between several countries. So for example, if you currently go to Spain, you need a PCR test in the moment.
Yes.
China is demanding a PCR test plus an antibody test. So it's just several things, and we will see how that develop. Nevertheless, I think it's also clear that people have to learn that an antigen test is not an antigen test. When you look to these tests, which are the point of care tests, where you just check manually there, these tests are not able to really produce by thousands a day. You can use them thousand-wise, but really having a clear combination to the passengers, putting that in mass throughput, that's just not feasible. And even more critical, the sensitivity of this test is not as good as the one with machines. So I would always recommend there to use the machines, and I think it will take some time until we have that governments will distinguish between the different antigen tests and say, well, those are accepted and those are not.
Okay, interesting. Because I saw that the European Union put out a recommendation on the 18th of November recommending that antigen tests, or rapid antigen tests is the phrase they used, is the way forward to allow business and travel to begin again in Europe. So I'll have to read that document again to see, do they distinguish between the manual and the machine?
They don't. They don't.
Okay.
So that's something I think we need to introduce into the public discussion, because there are two things. One is the sensitivity. If you compare PCR to antigen and antigen based on a machine with fluorescence based thing, you have a sensitivity which is something between factor 10 and 100 worse compared to the PCR. And if you then go to the point of care antigen, you lose another factor 10 to 100. And there we saw in our study in Frankfurt that we missed 50% of the positives. The other thing is you typically have false positives while doing an antigen test, which is for traveling not really a problem, because you may then need to wait for the PCR, which we also have in hand. So if you are positively tested by antigen, we automatically activate a PCR and inform you whether you're positive or not. And typically you should have that within 6 hours. So you may miss a flight and go a little bit later, but for the sake of safety, we may be willing as a community to accept that. It's more critical when you, for example, use these antigen tests in elderly homes. Because what are you doing in an elderly home when you have positive tested people there? You put them all together. But imagine 50% of the people you put together are false positives. And you put them together and it takes you 1, 2, or 3 days or even longer, as with other laboratories, to get the final result. And then you have these people being negative, false positive by antigen, together with people that are positive. At the end of the day, you don't need to wait for the positive confirmation, because they will turn positive in the time there. Yes. With bad effects. So that's a risk where I think we are missing that in the public discussion in the moment.
That's interesting. So your strategy, and obviously the testing that I did this morning, which is the first time I've experienced that, is to have 2 samples taken. So when I did the antigen, the first sample gets tested, I get a negative result, all good. But if that result had been positive, you then take the second sample and you run a PCR on that. And that's exactly. A safety mechanism.
Exactly. And we don't request then somebody who is highly likely to be positive to return to the test center again with a risk to other people, to our employees. We directly have it at hand, we save time, and we directly can do the confirmation.
So that's an interesting strategy. I have not seen that discussed anywhere before, but I like the idea. I understand it. It makes sense that for the sake of trying to manage numbers, we use antigen. Obviously, we're testing asymptomatic people in airports, so it's very different to the care home scenario. But we can test many people with the antigen, and then if we have an issue, we then obviously have the second sample, and that possibly is a way forward. Yeah, very interesting. How do you see the technology developing over the course of the next year? And the reason I ask is I'm very much of the opinion that the vaccine is going to take, at least a year to roll out in terms of the logistics of manufacturing, distributing. It isn't, people are talking about the spring of next year, even the summer. I think that's very optimistic. Do you think the technology will change in the meantime for the testing, antigen and PCR?
I think yes. I mean, there's a lot of innovation ongoing, and we are checking that as well. And everybody is trying to improve the technology we are using. Nevertheless, the PCR technology itself is a technology that's around now for 25, 30 years. So I don't expect big changes there. You tweak a little bit the materials, you tweak the size of the capillars you are using to make it faster, to be able to have faster heating cycles. But you always, and what we see is you are always playing between the question of speed on the one hand side and number of samples you can process. There are machines where you can process a PCR within 40, 45 minutes, but you only can put 4 or 5 samples into it, or let's say 16. Which is just not enough. When we are putting samples to a machine, we are running 400 samples in one PCR. Yeah? And that gives you the throughput you need to be able to serve that and scale up properly. So yes, there will be innovation, and in the antigen, we are at the beginning of the development. I think we will see also multi-assay antigen tests to be able directly to distinguish between, for example, flu and COVID. That's something that's critical. We will see down the road, and also the LAMP tests and others. So people are looking for different technologies to identify that. Mass spectrometry is another technology. People are trying to find ways to identify the virus. So yes, there will be further things, but you always have to play with this game between sensitivity, specificity, and time to get it done. And secondly, I share your opinion that it will take us a little bit longer than we would like to see a vaccination. And the question also will be how many people will be vaccinated. Will some country make it mandatory to be vaccinated to travel there? And how are we going to check if somebody is really vaccinated? And last but not least, how long lasting will be a vaccination be? Is it enough to have one shot for 1 year or 5 years or lifelong? We don't know that, so we have to look into that as well. So there are a lot of open things, and to close the gap between not knowing that yet and having certainty for travel and safety for health, you will use and need testing for sure.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, Dr. Volkmar. That's been very interesting, very useful. I've learned a lot, and it's given me some context to the testing that I had this morning, and also the testing I've had over the last 3 days. I don't know if your colleagues filled you in, but this trip that I'm on at the moment is 3 days, 3 countries, 3 airports, 3 antigen tests. And it's an experiment, I suppose, to educate the travel industry and the broader public within which I work. But also to see what's happening in Europe and to understand, how different airlines, airports, and countries are, experimenting and learning and trialing different options. So again, thank you for your time, and I wish you the best of luck and success in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the time, and I'm interested in your results and your insights in the different airports and the different things you've seen there. So looking forward to get that feedback from your side. Thank you.